Hello, and welcome to Life Beyond the Numbers, the podcast for people who are curious about how to have a more fulfilling work life. We live in a world largely driven by numbers, logic, and reason. But how we feel at work and about our work impacts us, our organisations, and society. There is a relationship between the numbers of our organisations and the life beyond the numbers. I'm Susan Nichrialon, your host. I've lived and worked in many countries. I've met people who love what they do and people who don't, people who bring their full selves to work and people who won't. But one thing that I've learned that is common to us all is that we are all unique and have unique experiences. And it's helpful to know that there are others who think like we do, or have had struggles too, or have gone where we want to go, or can show us things we didn't know. So join me and my guests as we place a lens on the human side of work life by sharing insights, stories, and strategies to inspire you to let your uniqueness shine through. Well, today I am delighted to welcome Kevin Chevis to Life Beyond the Numbers. Kevin, you're so welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This is the first time I've ever actually taken part in a podcast. So I'm really quite excited to take part and hopefully contribute some ideas and thoughts to the event.
Oh, you absolutely will. And you're most welcome. That's brilliant. There are not many people I speak to that it's their first time. So I can do whatever I want now.
Yeah, you can, wherever you want to go is fine with me.
So, Kevin, you've recently shifted your career slightly, and we'll come to that a bit later. But when I was researching you and your career, there was an article I saw that really struck me about how business is today. And it was an article about an award that the company you were executive vice president of won. And what you said was, 6 years ago, our employees would tell you we make speed cameras and red light cameras. But now there's a realization we need to do things to make the world a safer, better place. And that's a big shift.
Yeah, I think the companies I've been involved in over the years primarily develop technology, maintain it or sell it and provide a service or run it as a service. And I think in the past, it's very true to say that organizations get really turned on by the technology. As time moves on, clients want more from you. And my experience is they want more of an intimate relationship, which is sort of open, honest, trusting, and so on. Many clients don't want to just buy something from you anymore. So you have to change the way you operate. And I think what became clear to us in many countries around the world, our clients are trying to do something to make the world a better place. Now, that's a big statement, but in the sector I was involved in then, in smart mobility, it really was about reducing deaths, accidents on the roads. I think the last time I had the numbers, the World Health Organization estimated that the motor vehicle was the 11th biggest killer of human beings. And in the age range, something like 5 to 29. Forgive me if the numbers are slightly wrong, but it illustrates the point.
The life beyond as well.
Yeah, in the age range 5 to 29, the motor vehicle is the biggest killer. There's all sorts of reasons for that, whether it's people feeling too safe in their car and taking unnecessary risks, speeding, seat belts, mobile phones, bad driving, bad road design. There's a whole plethora of different things which impact that fact. And so if you want to have a long-term business relationship and a successful financial relationship with a client, you've got to take on board that you're a part of this initiative to make roads safer in all respects. And we should take that seriously. And it's an important thing. We should be proud of it. And I think many companies now have changed the way they operate to try and create that lasting relationship. So in that relationship, you still got to produce great technology. You still got to have a good price point. You still got to provide a good service. But I think it's more than that. It's very much about working with your customer, not for your customer. And that means you need to share your plans for the future, because if you share your plans for the future, they'll share theirs. And hopefully you can align that long-term goal strategy. And ultimately, that should translate into more profitable business and a long-term relationship, which you don't have to try and recreate every time you bid for something new. And it's certainly been my experience that if you can create this understanding and then translate that within the employees within your company, you can actually do very well. And that's an important point about this whole topic, because life is not perfect, technology isn't perfect, and developments always take longer than you want. And you need a word I like to use is empathy. I think it's a big word. Empathy between your client, what they're trying to do, and empathy for your client in what you're trying to achieve in your business. Because if you can create that, create a level of trust, then when things are not so easy, either on the supplier side or indeed the client side, there's an environment, a relationship, a level of respect and working together, which means you'll work it out. You'll help each other rather being confrontational. And certainly in my experience, when both parties have got that right, you can be hugely successful and you can have a lasting relationship. And that always works out in being profitable for both sides. But you have to take that responsibility on and you have to be proactive. You can't just sit back, win a tender, supply it and forget it anymore. I mean, it's completely changed.
It has, and I wonder if it has changed in every industry, Kevin. And I also, as you were talking, I wondered about your own suppliers. You talked about your customers, but did you expect a similar relationship, intimacy with your suppliers as well?
Yes, I mean, we did. I think when you're an organization that's looking to grow and, generate positive cash and all those sorts of things and profits, you do tend to focus very much on your own client. And yet there is a really big role with key suppliers to say, well, we need to work in a different way, a better way, so you can support what we're doing. Keep us flexible, dynamic, competitive. Everybody has to make a profit, that's for sure. But you need to ripple this back into the supply chain. I think we were only just starting to get to grips with that. A realization that key suppliers needed a corporate level relationship with us. And that included people like me, people in my team, and the next level down. And it's hard to juggle your time to do all of those things when you're always frontward facing. But nevertheless, I think it's an important point. And certainly we were starting to do more with key suppliers going forward. Something I think will pay dividends in the longer term.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key word or phrase there, the longer term. We focus a lot on the results of the next quarter or this year or the relationships now, when actually, if you're in business for the longer term and doing something like road safety, for example, or most of the businesses, we plan on longer term, yet we don't treat our businesses as if they're there for the long term, or our relationships either often.
Yeah, I think there's a trap people fall into. You do a plan, you do a next year, and you do the 5-year plan. And the 5-year plan, well, it's difficult. Who knows what we'll be doing in 5 years' time? Because things change, events happen, political initiatives alter. All those things impact your business, which you can't necessarily foresee. So there is always a tendency to focus on the month end and the quarter end, the half year, September, and then the end of the year. And you can get lost in that and forget that these other things are really crucial to success. I always used to get to the end of the year. There's a few shipments going out over the Christmas week. And I used to sit down, not deliberately, but I used to think, yeah, we've got our plan, we've got our budget, we've got this, we've got that. What actually am I going to do in the next 12 months? Of course, there's loads of things. There's hundreds of things you could do. There's hundreds of ways to spend your time. I found it helpful to say, well, what impacts our business the most? in a positive or negative way that may or may not even impact the numbers in the next 12 months, and try and find a simple way to write that down. And then I'd have that in my mind, and I'd start the year saying, well, okay, my year, I'm going to focus on these things. Now, of course, you have to focus on your main shareholders' topics, your day-to-day topics, but these other topics are things which can make a real difference. And they often take time to implement and time for the benefit to come back to you. But if you don't focus on these things, then you're just going to try and do the same thing month after month after month. And honestly, my experience has been you don't get very far doing that. And then there's a balance. It was quite interesting. You did some work with us a year or so ago. And one of my topics from my Christmas break was, we make a lot of silly errors which have an impact on all sorts of things, performance with the client, our own satisfaction and pride, our monthly figures, all those sorts of topics. And I sort of felt frustrated. Well, why does this happen? And we did some work with you, and Helen Joy came in to help us during our management days. And we discovered a number of things. And there were two important things that I realized. The first one was about people, and that we spent very little time focusing on how we interact. How do people want to interact? How do they like to interact? What turns them on? What turns them off? What gets them negative? What inspires them? And this was quite an interesting session that we had. We had several sessions. And in my own experience working with my CFO at the time, we're quite different people, but we've got the same objective. We want to be successful. We want to be successful in a good way. And we want to achieve, and we want to deliver and surpass the plans we put forward and support. But I realized that the way he operated was somewhat different to how I operated. He wanted to spend time with the detail and explain that to me at some length, and I just wanted to get to the end as fast as possible and make a decision. And there were moments where there was tension. It wasn't bad tension, but there was certainly tension. One of the things I learned during that time was, well, I do need to give him some opportunity in a constructive way to let him go through and explain to me what he needs to do, because it's important. It's important to him that I got it, and others in the team and the rest of the company. And it was also important for him to realize that sometimes you can't go through endless detail for hours on end. Sometimes you've got experience, you've got to trust your gut and your instant reaction. You've got to do something, you've got to do it today. Mm. And so sort of realizing that even with those two characters, those two roles, I think that was really helpful. And certainly post that exercise, I felt, I can't speak for him, but I certainly felt our working relationship became more productive. Because it was less trying to beat the other. It was actually being more collaborative. So that was the first thing that came out. And the second thing that came out, I was frustrated by sometimes things didn't happen in the organization that should have happened. And there was no real reason why they didn't. As a leader, you look into you say, well, why? What are we doing wrong? Why is this occurring? And we had a whole series of workshops and ideas put together. And rather than the senior level management team leading those, we let people the next level down lead them. And we said to my team, you can be in each of the groups, but you're not to take it over. And I think if I remember correctly, the idea was, how can we inspire and work with our management and the next level management down to improve performance, reduce errors, and ultimately improve the financial performance. And one thing that came out, which did surprise me, was the fact that people throughout the organization didn't really get what their contribution was to the organization. because they didn't fully understand what we were trying to do. And I was a bit shocked by that because I thought, well, I'd like to think I'm a reasonably good communicator. And we did spend time each month having a monthly call with 40 or 50, 60, maybe sometimes 100 people in the organization to say what we were up to, what the plan was, and all that stuff. So you think, yeah, ticking the box. But in actual fact, that has a place, but it wasn't actually effective. And because I realized, or a lot of us realize, that people need to understand a bit more than that. It's not about, well, this was year to date this month, this is year to date last month, how it compared, this was how it compared with our plan, this is the difference here. All those blooming numbers. I know you've got a financial background, but the numbers, there's too many. And then we started talking about other financial ratios, and this is what and what I actually realized we were doing was we were giving the management of the company the information that we supply to our main shareholder group. And whilst it has a relevance, it didn't have much context. And what the sort of people said was, well, some people don't know why what they do is important. And I think this is quite a big topic, actually, because it's not easy to say to everybody in the company, this month, if you do this, it'll be great and we'll achieve the following, because there's just too much detail. But what we started to do is try and find some ways to communicate on a fairly regular basis. Well, these are the key topics that affect what we're doing right now. Some of these are sort of 6 monthly, 9 monthly. Some of these are immediate. And try and flow that down in the organization. So it's not for me, for example, to tell everybody, hey, here's the 27 things that make a difference this month. If we do them all, it'll be great. It's actually about, for the management, next level, all the leaders, whatever level, to make sure they understand the context, because they're closer to everything. They know what's going on much more than I did. They're able to say, hey, this needs to be done right now, or this needs to be stopped, or this needs to be changed. They can then make some decisions and push things however they want to do it and make a real difference. And if somehow we then can recognize that, then you suddenly start to develop a motivated and dynamic workforce. That was the new topic for me, I have to say, in the last sort of 18, 24 months, that was working on how we go about that. And I, as I said earlier, I didn't think this is something the CEO or the senior management team should actually own. Lower levels should own it, because they're the ones that honestly make the real difference. And an example of what got me on this, we had an example one couple of years ago where something should have happened. One department should have done something for another department. One department was in England, one department was in Germany. And it was something that would take about 20 minutes to do. It wasn't done. I think both parties probably knew it was important. Neither chased each other, really. And the net result was we lost $1 million of revenue from our monthly forecast, which hurt, because 3 weeks earlier I had told my boss, don't worry, the number's secure. So what really needed to happen here is these two people in these two departments needed to understand each other, that they did need to call up, they did need to chase prompts. They don't need to send an official email, just to communicate, hey, this is needed for this. And if they'd said that, that would have been done, and we would have been $1 million better off that month. It's a dramatic example of people not actually communicating and working together. And it's a failure in the company, but I think importantly, it's a failure of management and myself. It actually recognizing that is, well, so how do we get these people to realize what was a relatively small task, which was fixed very, very quickly, but too late for the month end. How do we get them to appreciate and act that they need to take responsibility, they need to do something, and doing something isn't just report it up. Do you know
action? Yeah.
It's action. And that was an important thing.
As you're speaking there, Kevin, I'm kind of thinking it's quite similar to what you were saying about customers. That actually it's about the relationship, isn't it? And
Yes.
by you getting to know your customers or your suppliers, you're thinking in the long term, how can we work together? How can we help one another be successful, keep this going, meet each other's needs? And actually, it's no different internally within an organization either.
Not at all. Exactly my point. I think that in a relationship, internally and externally, you need to be clear and honest in a good way, in a constructive way, in a non-blame way. And that way, I think people, whether it's clients, whether it's suppliers, whether it's our own staff, you then start to create an environment where they feel comfortable to make a decision, change something. Just because you've got a process, if it's giving you the wrong outcome, then it's not a case of, well, I'm just going to follow the process and, hey, I'm doing a great job. My view is you're doing a really bad job if you just do that. You should proactively do something about it, whatever that happens to be. And you shouldn't be reckless, but you should be mindful, thoughtful, calculated, and professional. And then companies can evolve by the people rather than by business analysts coming in, redesigning all your processes. Do you know what I mean? And people have ownership then.
Way better as well, because anyone coming in to do your processes is going to make it even more complicated probably than it was in the first place, because they don't have that intimate understanding of the nuances of how people work together and what you're doing.
Sure.
And also what you said about making decisions and creating that environment. Anything you do in life, if you have the right environment, it's so much easier. It is always about creating the conditions. And actually within a workplace, you have much more control over what the conditions can be like. And you can nurture that if you take it seriously.
Yeah, and I'm quite keen on certain words. Empathy, as I said earlier. Trust is another one. And having faith in people, because all people are different. and there's all sorts of different characters in every walk of life. That's for sure. And most certainly in a business, and sometimes in a, quite a constrained environment. So if you're going to create that new scenario where people feel comfortable, you do have to have faith in them and trust them. And you've got to help them and support them. And if they get it wrong, well, okay, let's go through the learning exercise. Well, what went wrong? Why did it go wrong? Why is it not going to go wrong next time? Rather than a blame culture. And you've got to be clear and honest about that. And that can sometimes be quite direct, but it's got to be, caring and supportive. My experience with many people, if you treat them like that, many people respond well. And so in some cases, they respond much better than you'd expect. I certainly, in my career, have been in one or two situations where I was trusted to do something, which I didn't really have the experience for. I didn't really have the CV for, but somebody saw something in me and said, I think, Kevin, you could do this. Come and work for us and do this. And that person created an environment where, and these are sort of soft words, but they're so important, where everybody in that organization, most people, not everybody, most people, including myself, were there and did whatever was required, not because we were asked or told to, but because we wanted to. And that's a big difference. And that company was really successful. And I was really proud to be part of that. And I was there for many, many years. And I was so sad to leave it. I had to move on in the end, but I was so sad to leave it because the environment was such a positive place to be. A lot was expected of you. You had to perform, but it was done in such a way, as I said, people would work whatever was required over the weekend, overnight. No one was asked. Everyone just did because the environment enabled you to want to contribute. It's difficult in a big corporate organization where you have lots of processes and procedures, but you can take elements of this and layer it in. And I think that can make a real positive difference to, how people feel, how they work, and ultimately the numbers. Because at the end of the day, if you're running a business, if you own a business, as I've been a part of in the past, or you're working for a major group company, you've got to perform. It's really simple. And I, in my style, my career, I don't think that shouting at people and making it difficult and telling what they can't do is helpful at all. You actually should be telling what they can do. And then the good people will flourish and things will happen. And you say, wow, that's great. I didn't actually have anything to do with it at all, but we made progress.
Yeah, and I think people do rise to that level of trust, don't they, Kevin? Any of us, if somebody, like you said, you were given responsibility, you didn't know that you were necessarily capable of doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had that in my career as well, where people put their trust in you, and the last thing you want to do is let them down. You are
Yes.
going to do everything you can
Yeah.
to rise to that and actually probably exceed their expectations if you can, because it lights a fire in us. I think all of us want that to be, maybe not everyone, but a lot of us want to contribute and to be part of something greater than ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And it's hugely motivating. And you get tremendous loyalty, you get quality through this. It's inherent in that whole ethos. And if you can combine making sure the environment, that people know why they're doing what they're doing, whether it's about saving lives, about keeping this client happy, achieving this milestone, and you've got an environment where they feel trusted, then the good people and the aspiring people will do it all for you. It's really simple in that sense. Harder to put into practice, Susan, as you know, but nevertheless, and it can be hugely rewarding. And I think people, when you work hard, you also need to have a bit of fun.
Absolutely.
Not even when you've got the most difficult situations, if you can see the positive side of it and make it enjoyable to go through the trauma and the difficulty, God, it's enriching. At the end, you think, wow. Because I used to say, we're really good in a crisis. Wow, we're brilliant. It all turns on. And so the trick is really, what do we learn from that to be in less crises? So yeah.
Yeah, but
having a
keep
bit of
up
fun.
that, keep up that kind of atmosphere and everything.
Yeah.
Kevin, your career is incredible. You've been involved in MBOs, MBIs, you've worked cross-culturally, internationally. Intergenerationally as well, I guess.
Yes.
So when you look back, what are standout moments for you in these different merging of experiences and so on?
Yeah, there's a number of topics you picked up there.
Yeah.
I've been involved in a number of MBOs where, the management team, which I've been a part of, or has worked with private equity, bought the company, sold it, bought it back again, in fact. And that's interesting because you actually put your own investment in, and it suddenly becomes very personal because it's not just about me and my career, it's about my family. And we're taking a risk, we're taking a chance. And private equity companies who are there to be successful, failure is not optional, not making much progress isn't optional. So you have to have a plan you're going to meet and beat. And if you get a problem, you've got to deal with it. You've got to have a solution, a countermeasure already in play before that problem becomes apparent to the private equity company. Because if you don't, they won't tolerate tardiness, they won't tolerate inaction. They want to know that you are making changes, you are making decisions, you are making progress, you are fixing it, because you've got a certain amount of time that they'll tolerate you. And all the time things are going well, it's fine. It's great. You go to a monthly meeting, it's great. When things are going wrong, and we had an occasion where we bought two small companies, one after the other, months before the world financial crash. So the revenues dropped dramatically. So our nice plan, and then this was part of an MBO, MBI, we were the buy-in, and the management of the first company was the buyout. So we had some cultural issues there in the sense that we were coming in with experience acquiring this company, which the management team of the day had been running successfully for some time, and they were doing a buyout. And we were coming in, well, we're going to tell you how it's done. And they were going, well, who are these guys? Who are these jokers? And that was difficult because you had to sort of respect the fact that it was their business. They knew what they were talking. We came in with a plan to accelerate their business, which actually, in the way the deal was structured initially, wasn't their plan. It took time to sort of share, once the deal was done, to work through these things. And because of the financial crash, the plan we had to accelerate it. If I remember correctly, it's about an 18-month plan. We had to do all the things we were planning to do in 6 months because we were suddenly in a loss-making situation. In fact, some of us we decided not to take any salary for quite an extended period of time, just to prove to the private equity company we believe in this. And it worked out in the end, but it was tricky. There were moments when it was tricky, and we had to make some changes to try and steer it in a slightly different direction. But we focused on new technology, on sales, on customer service, and cash, reducing cost, all those sort of normal things. And in the end, it took a little bit longer than we'd hoped, but it paid off, and we made an exit to a division of a German corporation. And in fact, it was a company we were looking to work with internationally. And they got to know us quite well. I was chief exec at that point, and they said they decided they didn't want to work with us. They'd rather acquire us. So we thought, well, that's interesting. So we spoke to our shareholder. Timing was good. Same marketplace. The interesting there was you had two organizations that were going to come together that had been around a long time in their respective countries. Our business in the UK was predominantly UK business. The business in Germany was an international business and quite a lot bigger. And so you suddenly had this cultural division. And I likened it to use a German analogy, a bit like BMW. The Brits are trying to make the Mini. Want it fast, low cost, do a great job, get it to market quickly. Not so worried about the detail in the paperwork. And the Germans are making the 7 Series. Oh yeah, we're going to spend 2 years writing it down before we even build anything, because it's going to be high quality. It's going to last for years. People are going to love it. At the beginning, there was quite a difficulty there. And I was going to stay for 3 years. There was an earn out for 3 years. And I thought, well, I'm not too sure what my contribution to the division would be. And I was planning to sort of leave. And the group had a change in CEO. And a guy who's had a lot of international experience in the UK, England, Scotland, in America. And we'd met. And he asked me, long story short, to take over the division, which had acquired the company I was CEO of. And that was the biggest cultural moment in my career, for sure. Because when it was announced that I was taking over, nobody had any clue it was going to happen. And I was in Germany at the time for the announcement with all of the quite an extended management team in the German organization. And the outgoing chief exec made the announcement that he was retiring and announced the fact that I was taking over. And it was in a big room. I've sensed chills down my spine. And there was this silence for what seemed like minutes and minutes and minutes. And everybody was sort of didn't know what to say. Mouths dropped open. Who is this guy? Who is this Englishman? Many of them knew me and I had a good relationship, but they had no idea that I might be taking over the division as a whole. That was tricky because everybody suddenly became very defensive and very worried because they felt, well, what's going to happen here is Kevin going to move it all to the UK and we're going to lose our jobs. I'm exaggerating to make the point, but a lot of people felt that throughout the organization. And that couldn't be further from the truth because the division had a lot to deal with. It wasn't very happy as a group of people. The management team was struggling to work together and they hadn't really made the most of the acquisition of my company. They had a toxic contract at the time, a contract which was costing a lot of money, very unhappy customer. I had to embark on a plan to improve all of that. And there was an awful lot of negativity in the business. I set about change the management team somewhat. I did two things, well, three things. One or two people had to go, which was unfortunate, but they were not helpful at that time in that environment. I promoted some people, some in the UK, some in Germany, and I brought one person in, complete mix. And I said, look, we have to show as a team that we work together. If we make a decision, we stick by it. Even if you don't agree, if you actively work to undermine that decision, then you can leave right now. Because this company needs to show it's a team. This company needs to show it's unified. And we're not going to have any shouting, because there was quite a bit of shouting at division level. And we said, if you want to shout, then you can leave. We're going to be constructive, positive, supportive. We're going to make changes. We're going to make some progress. And the big topic we had was about R&D. We had three development locations, two in Germany, one in the UK. And I thought, this is a brilliant opportunity. We can blend the culture of how we develop. So what we do is we mix it up so that we got joint teams and all this sort of stuff. And in some respects that worked, and in other respects it didn't work. Because some people who've been in that industry, a very niche industry, and there aren't many people in the world that do what they do, like to do it the way they do it. And it's not for people like me to come and say, no, you're not. I want you to do it like this. Because they say, yeah, that's fine, great. And they go away and they just do it their way. And I found that trying to push the cultures together, whilst it worked in some areas with some people, and it is about people with the mindset, it didn't work in other areas. In actual fact, we made not much progress in some cases. And it took me and my team quite a long time to realize, well, do you know what? We need to let some things be done only in the UK or only in Germany or only in America, because that way we actually get more progress. The trick is making sure that what we do in those places meets a consistent standard, but fits a consistent strategy, a roadmap. And then because everybody wants to do everything, oh, we can do it here, we can do it better than they can. This is human nature, isn't it? In the end, after several attempts over several years, and no doubt it will change this year and next year, whatever, by the new EVP. But we found that letting certain things be done in certain places, let them make progress, let them get on with it, provided it fitted what we're trying to achieve, that was absolutely fine. You didn't need to try and get them to develop all in the same way, in the same style, in a combined multinational team. Now, that worked for our business, and we started to make progress. Not as fast as I would have liked, but we started to make progress. So that was, in some respects, a win, but it took, an ideal of let's merge it all together. You had to remember, you need to respect the fact these people know what they're doing, and they've done it like this for a long time. And there's good reason why they do it like that. Yes, they can adapt. Yes, they can change. Yes, they can be more collaborative wherever they sit, whether it's in UK, Germany, or America, Australia, wherever. But different cultures have different styles. In America, we did some R&D work, did it very quickly because they're highly motivated. Combination of engineers, some young interns, really smart people want to prove something. It's important to them to prove they can do it. You don't want to smother that with laborious process, and you want them to go on. A guy I used to work with used to say, put people in a room, shut the door, don't let them out until it's finished. What a great strategy. Of course you can't do that, but the principle's there. The principle's there. And so sometimes you have to adapt what you think is an ideal of a single unified culture. The actual fact, it may or may not be achievable. You need to say, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the best out of that culture there, and I'm going to get the best out of this culture here. But you do need an overarching level of communication and alignment on strategy and where you're going.
Yeah, it's freedom within a framework, isn't it? I was just thinking about you and your career and the people that influenced you, Kevin, when you were starting out, maybe. Like, are there some people that gave you that freedom from the beginning as well? I mean, you talked about people trusting in you, but is there, again, somebody that stands out and what they did?
One person, the guy I mentioned earlier, who he sadly passed away earlier this year, he was a mentor, leader, friend, fatherly figure to hundreds of people. And he met me. It's too long a story how we met, but we met and he offered me a job. I had to move 100 miles from my home with my wife and two young children. But he offered me a director's post, which essentially was a job I was at least one move away from. Double my salary. I mean, it was too good a thing to miss. And I remember sitting down in the office on my first day thinking, do you know, I don't actually know how I should do this job. And I got very sort of nervous about it for a while. But he creatively trusted you and he would support you and he gave you opportunity, gave you advice. And if you're smart enough, when he gave you the advice, you should really listen to it. There were two things he did, I think. One was that he recognized that if you as a person, you have friends and a family, which is equally important to him as you working for him. And there's a lovely story I've told to a few people over the years. And we moved to, this was 100 miles from where we both grew up, basically, my wife and I. And we've been married a long time. We were married very young. And it was too far for my wife to be part of her family and friends near where we actually still live today. So we moved up there and moved back very quickly. So then the net issue was that I needed to drive 100 miles to the office every day. We didn't do home working in those days. And I did it because I wanted to. Because the guy I worked with, Bruce, he was an amazing man. So he would do things. He knew about my family. He knew about my kids. One particular week, we were chatting on the way. He would call me on the way to the office. I'd leave early. He was the first person in the office. I was the second. He said, what's happening this week? I said, I've got to leave at good time on Thursday because my son's school sports day. And I was busy with tenders. I was sales and marketing director at the time. And on the Thursday, I had a meeting going on in my office and he came down at 1 minute to 12, knocked on the door, tapped on his watch. Come on, Kevin. And he opened the door and he said, you lot need to leave. Kevin's got to go because it's his son's sports day. Your son probably won't notice you're not there. So he won't necessarily miss it, but you will. That's the type of guy that he was. We not just me, most people in the entire company and all people around and all the good things he did for his local community and stuff wouldn't have to be asked to do anything. We did it because we really, really wanted to. And we knew that if we got it wrong, he wouldn't be screaming and shouting, he would support us. And then what could we do differently? Okay, well, what about this? And he'd come up with a solution. And he had an incredible capacity to take a complex topic and simplify it to something we could all understand. I remember one decision we had to make. It was the biggest bid we'd ever done. And we had to decide, shall we pull out ourselves and join another bidder? Because we were working with them and we were bidding direct, or should we just keep the two going or go on our own? We were in private equity at the time. This would affect the value of the company. So big decision. And we did all this analysis and we had a couple of hours meeting and I could tell he was getting a bit tired of all the detail and all the rationale and this and that, pros, cons, opportunities, risks, and so on. And we got to the end of the presentation and he just looked at me and said, Kevin, what do you think? And he said, just give me a few words. Don't give me a long sentence. And I said, well, I think we should do this. And he said, right, Kevin thinks we should do that. Let's do that then. Meeting closed. Fortunately, we won. But I mean, it was his instinct and his faith in human nature and people was absolutely second to none. And that inspiration to me changed my life, my whole career, and my family's. So I'm eternally grateful to him.
Wow. I think in a way, anyone listening to this, the answer might be obvious, but for people who are aspiring into similar positions that you've been in, Kevin, what would you say to them to focus on and to to really be the one thing?
The one thing. Oh, there's so many. As a reaction to your question, trust yourself and other people and have clarity of thought. Don't try and do too many things all at the same time. Make steps. Sometimes 6 small steps better than 1 big step. And if you're going to make a change, make sure it's tangible. It has a material impact, because small changes don't actually make any difference at all on the whole. But focus on topics that are going to make progress, and enjoy other people, enjoy the diversity, the culture, the different languages or the different styles of people. Everybody's got something to offer. You just got to recognize it. I think if you can do that, you can be capable of leading, and leading in a good way, having some fun, being motivational, inspirational, and getting a huge amount of satisfaction yourself, which, let's be honest, we all want that. And we should be proud of that. We've all got an ego to some extent. You can acknowledge the fact you're capable. I say this to a lot of people: acknowledge the fact you can have a good idea every day. It doesn't matter how small it is. The important thing is to recognize that fact. You feel good. And I think that can be infectious.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. Yeah, brilliant. And what's next for you now, Kevin?
Having traveled so much for so long, for so many years, at Heathrow nearly every other week, I taken a little bit of a step back, so I've got more control over my personal life and time. I've got 2 little granddaughters now. I'm lucky I can be a part of their life, and my wife can be, and all that.
And they're lucky.
Yeah, it's great. And I absolutely I love that aspect of where I am currently. It's so enriching. But I am looking to do some advisory work, consultancy work. I've got a few opportunities which sort of started to come my way. So I'm probably going to be doing some of that over the coming years, because I don't want to do nothing.
Yeah, I can imagine. But you can also choose now as well.
Yeah, pick and choose a bit. I mean, there's a luxury that, and I appreciate that. There's a bit of a luxury, but then, yeah, I'm fortunate to be where I am, with who I'm with, and able to do what I can do now. I do consider myself a fortunate, lucky person.
Fantastic. And I'm going to put you on the spot now with one last question, because you were one of the early readers of my book, Leading Beyond the Numbers. And I know it's a couple of months ago since you read it, but would you recommend it to people?
Yeah, for sure. I was honored that you asked me, actually. I haven't been asked to review a book before. So I sat down at the back end of last year, and I thought, yeah, I like to read things quickly, and I'll do this 20 minutes. I'll quick zip through, make some comments. That's what I was planning to do. I started to read it, and I put it down. I thought, oh, no, I need to read this properly, because you have some insights which touch on some of the things I've discussed today about the environment, about people, understanding what motivates them, what demotivates them, respect, and working on these types of things. If you've got a happy workforce, you can have a happy company, you'll do better. It's really simple. But we don't talk about those things in meetings, because we always talk about this month last year, this month this year, this month next year. What was our plan? What's our reforecast? You talk about the detail. And it's actual fact, my experience of what you allude to in your book very clearly is, if you can get the environment right for the people, and make things work for the people, they will make the numbers work for you. It's really simple. And you probably then need to spend less time looking at the numbers and trying to dissect the numbers. What happened here? Why is that? Oh, my goodness me. Because people have ingenuity and ideas, and you just need to harness that. And that's a key factor of, I think, management going forward. So I really enjoyed reading your book. I learned a few things, and I really connected with quite a few topics. So yeah, from my perspective, I highly recommend it. And congratulations on writing such a great book.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you. And you should have seen my face when he said he was going to read it in 20 minutes. But never mind. Kevin, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you this morning. And if somebody would like to connect with you and find out more, LinkedIn?
Yeah. Yes, I'm on LinkedIn, and you can contact me through there. That's probably the best way, I would think. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, look, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to sharing this episode with the world.
Me too. And thank you very much for asking me. I've really enjoyed today. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the paths we traversed on today's episode. If something rang through for you, be sure to let me know. Or maybe you can share this with someone in your life who would benefit from listening too. And if you enjoy helping others, I'd be so grateful if you would leave a review, so that people who might also be curious about their own life beyond the numbers can discover this podcast too.